Call sign. The judge smirked, leaning back in his chair. The courtroom chuckled. The single dad standing before him, worn boots, calloused hands, tired eyes, didn't flinch. He adjusted Hisson's faded backpack on the bench beside him, met the judge's mocking gaze, and said quietly, "Shadowhawk, sir." The lauder died instantly. The ballet froze, and the judge's face turned pale. No one in that room knew that behind the humble janitor fighting for custody of his son stood one of the most decorated, classified, and ghost-like legends in U.S. military history. And in the next 10 minutes, that courtroom and the judge himself would never be the same again. Daniel Reeves had learned long ago that life didn't care about medals or missions. It cared about mistakes. Once he had been Captain Daniel Shadowhawk Reeves, an elite Air Force pilot, the man who could fly through a sandstorm without radar, who'd rescued hostages in deserts and mountains, who disappeared off the grid for months at a time for classified operations. But all of that ended the day his wife, Claire, died. A drunk driver ran a red light. She never made it home. Daniel came back from deployment to find Hisson Jacob, 6 years old, alone in foster care. The military offered condolences. The system offered forms. The world offered silence. He hung up his uniform, took a janitor's job at a courthouse just to be near the system that took Hisson away. Every night he scrubbed the same marble floors where his fate would one day be decided. Every morning he left a note in Jacob's school lunchbox with the same words, "I'll bring you home, buddy. I promise." For 2 years, Daniel fought quietly, filling forms, attending hearings, keeping his head down. The judge assigned to his case, Judge Harold Benton, was known for his ego more than his justice. Benton saw Daniel as nothing more than a janitor, uneducated, poor, unfit. When Daniel tried to explain he'd been a military pilot, Benton cut him off. "Save the streets. This isn't a movie." Daniel clenched his jaw and took it. Every insult, every smirk, because losing his temper would mean losing Jacob. But that day, the final custody hearing, something changed. The judge's nephew, Mark Benton, a wealthy lawyer representing the Foster family, taunted Daniel as they waited. "You really think mopping floors qualifies you to raise a killed? Tell me, what's your call sign, janitor?" Daniel gave a small smile. "You wouldn't believe me if I told you." When the court session began, the judge, amused by his nephew's whisper, leaned forward and said with mock seriousness, "Mr. Reeves, since you're so mysterious, care to tell the court your call sign?" The room chuckled. Even the social worker smiled uncomfortably. Daniel looked at his son sitting behind the railing, small, scared, clutching that same old backpack, and then back at the judge. And he said softly, "Shadowhawk, sir." The laughter stopped because the bailiff, a Marine veteran, suddenly straightened. His eyes widened. "Sir, did you say Shadowhawk?" The courtroom grew tense. The judge frowned. "Why, you know him?" The bailiff nodded slowly. Everyone in the sandbox knew Shadowhawk. He's the pilot who saved Delta Team Bravo in Fallujah. They called him a ghost. No one ever saw him, but when he flew, people lived. The judge's smile faltered. Daniel didn't gloat. He didn't boast. He just said quietly, "All I want is to be a father again, Your Honor. Not a soldier, just a father." Word spread like wildfire through the courthouse. Veterans in the audience began whispering, a man once thought lost in action. The hero of countless unconfirmed missions was standing right there, dressed in a janitor's uniform. The judge tried to regain control. Military record or not, "Mr. Reeves, the law doesn't bend for stories." But just then the court doors opened. A woman in a gray suit walked in, Colonel Sarah Mitchell, U.S. Air Force. "With respect, Your Honor," she said, holding a folder. "It should bend for truth." She handed over a sealed file. "By presidential order, this man's service record was classified, but as of this morning it's being declassified for this hearing. You might want to read before you pass judgment." The judge opened it and his hands shook. Inside were commendations for valor, mission logs, and photos of Daniel carrying a wounded child through smoke and gunfire. The child of a local diplomat who'd been rescued under impossible odds. Colonel Mitchell continued, "Captain Reeves saved 47 lives during his service. He retired only to take care of his son. The Air Force considers him one of its finest, and yes, he's Shadowhawk." The courtroom was silent. The judge, sweating now, tried to speak, but the words caught in his throat. Daniel looked up. "Sir, I never wanted special treatment. I just wanted a fair shot. My son's all I've got." For the first time, Judge Benton looked ashamed. He cleared his throat. "The court rules custody of Jacob Reeves be granted to his father, Daniel Reeves." A collective sigh and then applause filled the room. Even the Foster family stood in quiet respect. Jacob ran to his father, hugging him tight. Daniel whispered, "Told you, buddy. I'd bring you home." The courthouse janitor's closet was empty now. On the wall hung a framed newspaper clipping. Shadowhawk wins custody battle. Inspires veterans nationwide. Daniel now worked as a flight instructor at a small airbase, teaching young pilots not just how to fly, but how to believe. Sometimes when the sun set and the runway glowed orange, he'd lift Hisson into the cockpit and say, "See the horizon? That's where hope lives. And no matter how dark it gets, you keep flying toward it. True strength doesn't shout, it endures. You don't need medals to be a hero. Only the courage to keep fighting for what truly matters."